Hi, this is Julie Halpern, author of The Effort List, and you're listening to the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast, where we invite you to spend just a few minutes with the staff at Cook Library. I'm Nate Goss, and I'm here today with Joe Murrow, one of our adult services librarians who also assists with the library's local history and genealogy work. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks for having me.
The Academy Awards are this weekend, so we have movies on the mind here at the library. And when it comes to Hollywood, there's a neat piece of history that connects our small town to the icons of the silver screen. Marlon Brando, one of the greatest actors of all time, spent several of his formative high school years right here in Libertyville. Joe recently posted a well-researched blog post on our Shelf Life blog about Brando's years here, and so we wanted to have Joe come on to share what he learned. So, Joe, before we get into too many details about Brando and his time here, maybe if you could just give us a really brief summary of how he came to live in Libertyville and maybe how long he was here for.
Definitely. Well, Marlon Brando was born to Marlon Brando Sr. and Dorothy Dottie Brando on April 3rd, 1924 in Omaha, Nebraska. He was raised with two older sisters, Jocelyn Brando and Frances. And in the late 1920s, his family moved to Evanston when his father took a position at a chemical manufacturing plant in Chicago. Eventually, however, his parents separated when he was 11. His mother moved the family to California to be with her family. And in 1938, Marlon Brando's mother and father reconciled and moved to Libertyville.
So as they're coming to Libertyville, his mother and father's marriage had already been separated for a while, and it's actually they came together at this time in Libertyville then?
Exactly. Marlon Brando's mother had deep problems with alcoholism. This was probably not helped by his father's roving eye, so to speak. And there were times where Marlon Brando's father would actually have to go and get his wife from the jail just because she had been locked up for being publicly intoxicated. Although he himself had problems with alcohol. So Marlon Brando's early childhood and even later childhood were not the best of all circumstances to grow up in.
Now, as for the time in Libertyville, how many years total are we looking at? And what age would Marlon have been when he was here?
He would have been in his mid to late teens. They moved in 1938 in the fall, and he spent all of his high school years here, although they were somewhat cut short. Marlon Brando was not the best student. He later in autobiography admitted that he was an all-around incorrigible student, chronically truant, and was known for his practical jokes, which included everything from, and there are multiple legends which have grown up around this, hanging a dead skunk from the scoreboard upwind of classrooms. And at one point, when his teacher complained of him not handing in his homework on time, doing his French homework on toilet paper, which he proceeded to roll out.
So already sort of the clever creative work in the works right here in Libertyville as sort of a prankster teen, huh?
Exactly. He was very aware that he was always on stage, and he wanted to be well-liked because as a farm kid living on the edge of town, he had a bit of a chip on his shoulder.
Did he make friends easily? I mean, he would be coming in as a new kid.
The town at the time was much more rural than it was now and much more conservative. They were viewed alternatively as upper middle class and somewhat on the wild side. He did have a few friends, including...
You mean the Brando family was viewed as upper middle class and a little bit wild.
Exactly. He himself had a few friends, including Bob Hopkins, who actually nominated Marlon Brando to be class vice president solely for the fact that it was October and Brando was still wearing a T-shirt. And he and his friends actually formed their own band at one point.
No way.
Yes.
So Brando was in a band right here in Libertyville.
Exactly.
Do you know what he played?
He was a drummer.
Okay.
According to him, he had been inspired by the noise of raindrops falling on the train when they were moving to Libertyville.
Okay.
They called themselves the Keg Brando and his Kegliners, which were...
the Keg Brando and his Kegliners.
Exactly. They play on drums which were made from large wooden beer kegs, thus the name.
Sure.
However, due to lack of practice and general disinterest, the band soon disintegrated. Although that doesn't mean that Brando was not busy during his time here. He also was involved in the drama club, which he joined almost as soon as he arrived, and the school football team.
Yeah, how cool would it be to maybe be in a high school production and say you were there with Brando?
Exactly.
Well, so he was on the football team then, or was he just at a lot of the football games? Or
he was on the football team, but again, similarly to his career as a musician, he wasn't exactly interested in practicing. He just kind of wanted to be there for the sake of goofing around and being the center of attention. And so he quickly moved on after that. In fact, the funny part is, although he would go on to become one of the greatest actors of all time, he actually was never in any production at the Libertyville High School.
So he strikes me as someone who didn't have a lot of direction or drive in his high school years.
No. In fact, if you look at his pranks he pulled, you can definitely see someone who was struggling with just finding a center, somewhere to really anchor himself.
But do you get a sense when you were doing your research, was he obviously a bit of a prankster, troublemaker? Was he a well-liked kid, though? Or, I mean, did he fit in all right here in Libertyville?
He did, yes. He had a few close friends and was fairly well-liked, although I doubt the teacher could say the same.
Yeah.
He would go on dates with women who were considered very beautiful, and he would talk about how he would just walk along the street with friends going to the theater and working there, which he said he actually liked very much.
So he worked at the Liberty Theater then?
Exactly.
The one right here in downtown.
He was an usher at the Liberty Theater, and the funny part is that he actually pulled one of his greatest pranks there after he got fired, because at the time it was required that ushers wear full uniforms with dress shirts. However, he disliked wearing dress shirts, especially during the summer months. And after his firing, according to him, and I found a little bit of evidence that corroborates this, put rotten Limburger cheese along with broccoli, which had been sitting out in the sun for almost 2 weeks, into the air conditioning unit. And according to him, they never found out who it was.
The thought of that smell is, it sounds like it would never go away.
It sounds like according to him, he evacuated the entire theater, so...
Already making a name for himself then.
Very much so.
So why don't we talk a little bit about maybe some of the research that you did for this? What was it like? Would you say it was easy to find this information? Was it difficult to figure out about, Brando's early years?
Finding information wasn't so much the hard part. We have a great autobiography from him, as well as a biography by another author. And we also have a file on him, and there's a lot of research and material online, too. Childhood pictures, bibliographical information. The problem I found was parsing out the legend from fact.
Yeah. You get to these sort of these celebrities that reach almost mythical status, and it seems like if they live in a small town, that small town really wants to kind of take ownership of that.
Exactly.
So could you tell us about what would you do to figure that out? Like, were there certain pieces of information that you were like, this is just too tall of a tale, I can't include this in my post for the library?
Well, one rumor as to why Marlon Brando left Libertyville High School was that he had ridden a motorcycle down the hallways, and that seemed a bit far-fetched.
Sure.
Other resources had him anywhere from getting caught smoking in class to riding a bicycle, which seems a bit more realistic,
Sure.
and that was repeated more often and in more reliable resources than elsewhere.
Yeah. So did he graduate Libertyville High School from Libertyville?
He did not. It seems that at the end of his sophomore year, in the fall of 1941, his father actually sent him to Shadrach Military Academy in Minnesota in hopes of straightening him out. And at the time, his grades were so poor they were considering holding him back a year.
Yeah, well, even with his reputation in Hollywood, it would be debatable whether that had any effect at all.
No, I would say that it probably had very little impact on his attitude going forward, which, all things considered, was probably for the best.
Yeah, I mean, we got some great performances out of it. By the way, personal question, do you have a favorite Brando film or performance?
I would probably say just The Wild Ones, just because it was young Brando at the height of his career, and just you can really see that wild streak, which he probably wasn't trying that hard to act out. So
He had a lot to pull from, possibly from his experience in Libertyville.
Exactly.
So Joe, let's say someone wants to come into the library and take a look at Brando for themselves. What kind of artifacts do we have in the library where they could actually take a look at something Brando's a part of Libertyville?
That's actually a really good question. Well, as it so happens, we have a collection of Libertyville High School yearbooks, and he pops up in the yearbooks from 1939, 1940, and 1941. In fact, I used the cover image for my blog post from the high school yearbook from 1939.
Now, are these like portrait photos, or are they like class photos? Or...
Class photos, and then he also appears in the drama club as well.
Cool. Very cool.
One thing I did also want to add before we go was that his sister, Jocelyn, was actually an actress in her own right.
This was an older sister?
Yes, they were both older sisters. When he moved to New York, where he began his acting career, he was actually following his sister, who was already there. And she would go on to star in the film noir The Big Heat, 1953. However, she was blacklisted later for signing a peace petition, although she would go on to eventually, once the blacklist kind of petered out at the end of the 1950s into the 60s, to continue her movie career.
Yeah, so really he was even aimless to the point where he was kind of just following his sister into acting.
Exactly.
Wow. So much to learn right here from doing Libertyville research, huh?
Definitely. I really enjoy doing it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I enjoyed listening to this, Joe. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.
So if you would like to dig up more Libertyville history, we always encourage you to browse our local history collection in the library and online. You can stop into our Cook Park location or visit our website at www.cooklib.org. If you're on the website, just go to the research page and find the local history link. Also, why not check out a stack of Marlon Brando's films with your access to the library's extensive DVD Blu-ray collection? Just use the online catalog to search for titles. While you're on our website, don't forget to also visit Shelf Life, the library's blog. You will definitely want to read Joe's full blog post article on that blog. That article is called A Kid Named Bud, and you'll see that he includes even a few more different little anecdotes and stories about Brando's time here in Libertyville. The blog's URL or web address is shelflife.cooklib.org. If you ever want to get in touch with us, maybe leave us some feedback or even suggest some future podcast episodes, you can always email us at webmaster@cooklib.org. And if you're enjoying this podcast, if you like what you're hearing, the best thing you can do is just tell your friends, tell your family, and also possibly just give us a nice little note on iTunes and a kind rating. We will be back soon, but until then, keep reading, keep watching, and keep listening.